Okay, good morning. It is 11 o'clock Central Time. Hopefully you all can hear me. If you're seeing that I'm talking but cannot hear me, please put in the chats that you cannot hear me and we can work to get that figured out. Okay. I'm not seeing anything on my end that would indicate we're not live here, so I'm going to go ahead and kick us off. All right, well, good morning, everyone. My name is Ian Preston. I serve as the president of TAPA's Middle Tennessee chapter. We are here. I'm going to just share something real quick. We are here to hear from some very awesome speakers as part of our programming that we serve our membership for. You'll see we do a number of things. If you've been to some of our events before, you'll know that we do in-person and virtual. Mainly in our bylaws, though, we at a minimum have trainings for our planning commissioners and boards of zoning appeal. We do that every fall for free. We also have in-person programming events, which I'll show you in a moment here. And all of our in-person and virtual events are for CM credits. So if you are a member or if you are an AICP planner, you can attend or tune in to our events and get credit for attending. Another role that our chapter has is to organize and help plan the fall conference that TAPA hosts every year. If you attended the fall conference last year, you were in Memphis. This year will be hosted in Kingsport, November 6th through 8th. That event is organized by the State of Franklin chapter in Northeast Tennessee. And then next year, you may or may not know, Middle Tennessee, which is our chapter here, will be organizing the fall conference at a date and location TBD. So stay tuned for that. I'm going to pull up a quick photo for us. On the right-hand side, you'll see all of our board members. I'm Ian, like I mentioned. We also have Dustin Shane from Metro Nashville Planning. Dustin serves as our secretary. Sean Sentaya is our finance chair. He couldn't be with us today, but he is with the Federal Highway Administration. Susan Stephenhagen Griffith, Robert Harris, Mary Conley, and Brian Rose. While they don't have exact board member titles, we all do the same thing, which is support each other in bringing programming, networking, and events like this to you, to our members. So thank you for tuning in. Quickly, I'm just going to go through some photos of some events that we've hosted in the past. Coming out of COVID, we had a tour of the 5th and Broadway development before it opened, which was kind of neat. Got to understand kind of the mixed-use development nature of that downtown area. Some of you might have been, some of you may even be in this photo. The year after, we hosted a tour of the Geodis Stadium and its facilities before opening. That was a really good one. And just last year, we had a tour of the Tennessee State Library and Archives. And this past spring, we were all at the Newhoff development, understanding kind of that community's or that new development's role in the Germantown, North Nashville neighborhood community. That was a really great event. So these are some examples of what you can expect if you join our chapter. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get started with today's content. Oh, one more thing, sorry. Things to be on the lookout for. This November, like I mentioned earlier, we will be having our Planning Commission and Boards of Zoning Appeal training. That is specifically for our planning commissioners and boards of zoning appeal. If you have friends or colleagues or know about that, you'll know that the topics relate to, typically we'll have law and ethics, but we also have an elective type of topic or genre. In the past, we've had Department of Health speak, we've had landscape architects speak, we've had numerous other things. If you have an idea about content or any idea about any programming or tour that we have, we are open to having it or speaking with you to get it scheduled. So And then lastly, there are rumors about a tour of the B&A airport and its facilities, perhaps this fall, perhaps next year. We're still working on the details of that, but that is something to be on the lookout for. So thank you very much for your attention to that. I'm going to go ahead and introduce our topic today, and then also our speakers who have so generously donated their time to speak with us this morning. Environmental justice, as you know, is our topic. I'm going to read, bear with me, a statement to kick us off here. There are, of course, numerous definitions. I am going to read USDOT's definition because I think it's very meaningful to us as planners, but it also includes some language, some terms that you may find particularly helpful for organizations that you may not associate with our work. If you're in the public sector, private sector world and planning, you probably have a pretty good idea. But it was our intent today to bring you some things, some speakers, some organizational content that address environmental justice goals that you may not be familiar with. So that's what we're here to learn today. So without further ado, give me a moment and follow along if you like. Environmental justice means the just treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of income, race, color, national origin, tribal affiliation, or disability, in agency decision-making and other federal activities that affect human health and the environment, so that people are fully protected from disproportionate and adverse human health and environmental effects, including risks and hazards, including those related to climate change, the cumulative impacts of environmental and other burdens, and the legacy of racism or other structural or systemic barriers, and have equitable access to a healthy, sustainable, and resilient environment in which to live, play, work, learn, grow, worship, and engage in cultural and subsistence practices. And I underlined that last part because I think it's particularly important for folks to understand that if this is the first time you've heard the environmental justice term, it does not only relate to the natural environment, but also the built environment. The environments that, well, the natural and the built environment are the environments that human beings occupy and, of course, work to make more equitable. With that in mind, we're going to be hearing from the following speakers. I'm going to be reading out a couple of sentences for each, and then we will get started with our first question. And I will lay a couple of ground rules right before we get started. So first speaker we have is Darkenia Waller. Darkenia Waller is the Executive Director, Legal Aid Society of Middle Tennessee and the Cumberlands, which is Tennessee's largest nonprofit law firm. From 8 locations across Middle Tennessee, the firm offers free civil legal services to low-income and vulnerable people. As the Chief Executive Officer, she helps set vision and create resources to ensure that all citizens have equal access to justice. Thank you for joining, Darkenia. Next, we have Robert Johnson, who comes from a family of transportation planners and has over 20 years experience of public and active transport operations and planning. His passion is encouraging and facilitating everyone to use alternative transport. At WeGo Transit, Robert plans transit routes and bus stops, reviews private and public development proposals, and coordinates with Metro Nashville departments and TDOT. Welcome, Robert. Last but certainly not least, Jennifer Chalos has worked with the Cumberland Region Tomorrow for 3 years to bolster community engagement, support, and partnership in the region to positively impact quality of life in Middle Tennessee. Since 2024, Chalos and her team have been leading the Cumberland Region Tomorrow board to facilitate greater impact. With 30 years experience in nonprofit management and implementing impactful institutional advancement strategies, Chalos and her team are making a difference in the communities in which we live, work, and serve. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and turn it over to our speakers. I'm going to open with a question. For all of our attendees, please put any questions in the chat if you're able to. If you're not, one of our team members will try and help you and get our technical system working great. If it is a question based off of a response you are getting live, we'll do our best to answer that live to keep that thread of consciousness consistent. We can answer the question live. For any other questions, we will get to them at the Q&A part of our discussion, which we're planning to have at 12 Central Time. So going for 50 minutes of speaking and 30 minutes of good Q&A. With that, I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to offer up our first question to Darkinia. So Darkinia, you are on deck if you'd like to unmute in a moment here. The first question, and each of our speakers will get this, how does your organization incorporate and address environmental justice goals in your line of work? Go ahead, Darkinia.
Thank you for having me. First of all, just to give a little bit of context of who we are, so that we can talk about how it impacts us. Again, we are Tennessee's largest nonprofit law firm. A lot of times, and a recent study showed that more than half of people believe that if you cannot afford an attorney, you will be appointed one. And absolutely, that's the case if you are facing criminal charges or some sort of incarceration. We are all familiar with Miranda rights, and that visual of somebody's head being ducked into the back of a police car when they have been charged with a crime. Well, that is absolutely the case. If you're being charged with a crime, you have a right to an attorney, and if you cannot afford one, one will be appointed to you. The fact of the matter is, however, that does not apply in civil cases. Civil cases are those cases where money may be involved, or you are not being charged with a crime, but nonetheless an injustice has occurred. There is no legal right to an attorney in those cases. If you're facing an eviction, you don't have a right to an attorney. If you are trying to get a divorce, you don't have a right to an attorney. Or if you're fighting some environmental justice issue, you don't have a right to an attorney. If you can afford one, you can pay for one, but it will not be provided to you for free. And so that's where our organization comes into play. We are a nonprofit, and so we survive on donations and grants. And I'd like to say we're a group of attorneys who got together and said it's unfortunate that there are people who cannot fight for their rights with an attorney because they can't afford one, and we'll try and fill that gap. Founded in 1969, we've grown from just a handful of attorneys to 48 attorneys now across Middle Tennessee, offering this free civil legal services to people who cannot afford it. And so in this space, when it comes to environmental justice in particular, our goal is to help identify the issue. Now, that being said, we try to stay out of lanes where a private attorney could possibly be able to pursue a case and maybe receive a recovery on the back end, which you may be familiar with as a contingency fee. But nonetheless, whether it's our legal services program as advocates, or whether it's private attorneys who represent persons who are facing this kind of injustice, lawyers step in to try and address the issue. And so that may one of the more familiar cases you may know about is, for example, like the Camp Lejeune cases, which had to do, of course, with the contamination of water. And all of that is, in fact, an environmental justice issue. That one's specific to water, but it comes into place anytime we're dealing with environments and how they are set up and the impact they may have. So for us, a lot of our work is just identifying it and then helping people to advocate for the rights that they have, educating them relative to how their particular city, county, state addresses environmental justice, and then trying to connect them to the organizations that are advocates in that space.
Thanks, Darkinia. Very, very thorough. We'll get back to some of those topics you bring up here shortly. Robert, if you are prepared to speak, I'd love to offer that same question to you. How does your organization incorporate and address environmental justice goals in your work?
Yes, thank you very much. Good morning, all. My name's Robert Johnson, and as Ian said, I'm a transit planner with WeGo. I'll start with the organization's visions and goals. We have a vision to be an embraced part of the community through friendly, sustainable, reliable, trusted public transportation, everywhere for everyone. So the use of the words embraced and trusted and for everyone, those imply that we're going to engage with the entire community, that we're going to listen, we're actually going to learn what it is that they want, and we're going to action that. So I think those are absolutely core tenets of environmental justice, which is reaching out to everybody, listening to what they have to say, and actually actioning it. That's in our mission. One of our values is honest collaboration, which I really like, which also implies not just listening to everybody, but actually doing something about what they say. And again, I think that's kind of basic to environmental justice. So those are sort of, what our organization's values are around the subject. Getting a lot more prosaic, we have to comply with Title VI of the Civil Rights Act 1964. Now, that only prohibits discrimination on the basis of race, colour and national origin. But nonetheless, we take that very seriously as a bus company. We run analyses of the community impacts of every bus service change that we make. And we do those twice a year. We do those every 6 months. So we run an analysis through specialist software that takes in tons of demographic data and then outputs specific answers as to how we're going to impact disadvantaged people by every single service change that we do, right down to moving a bus stop or diverting a bus down a parallel street. The data we use will push out an answer telling you whether we had a greater or lesser impact on disadvantaged communities, and in accordance with the US DOT's requests to comply with Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, it'll push out an answer. Was the move we proposed disproportionately affecting disadvantaged people? So that's our key measure of how we do or do not impact disadvantaged people, and how we do or do not discriminate against people, which I think is a core tenet of environmental justice. And then on top of that, there's also a couple of executive orders from the US DOT requiring environmental justice to be considered whenever you do a project, and whenever you run a service. One of those actually is the Justice 40 initiative. The Justice 40 initiative is the federal government has said 40% of most of their money, not all, but 40% of most of the money expended by the US DOT must actually go toward disadvantaged communities. And again, whenever you do a project that uses federal money, they're going to ask you to prove that. So we have to prove that. And then another one actually is the NEPA process. The NEPA process requires you, as you said, Ian, not just to consider the flora and fauna, but also the impact on the human environment. That's actually already in the NEPA process, and obviously has been for decades. But the last administration certainly highlighted that, both of the Justice 40 staff and bunches of their questions now when you apply for a grant are honing in not just on the natural environment, but also the human environment when you apply for federal money at the NEPA process stage, which is not something I was really aware of as to how they were using NEPA with regards to environmental justice now. That covers what I wanted to say overall about how we address it, and what's in our vision and our mission and our initiatives. And then I'd love to talk at length about development review. My specialist subject is development review at WeGo, both partnering with the public sector and also private sector developers who are building things along the roadway beside our bus services, and how I personally think about what community benefits a developer can bring to the community, with specific reference to can those benefit disadvantaged people, particularly transportation disadvantaged people. So that's how I think about environmental justice nearly every day. Thanks. Cheers, Im.
Thank you, Robert. And I'm sure we'll get into some more of what you mentioned earlier in a little bit here in more depth. Thank you. Jennifer, I believe, is having some technical issues joining. Micah, if you can hear me, Jennifer Chalos is trying to get unmuted, and we need her to have the floor. If I don't hear anything in the next couple of seconds, I'm going to keep rolling. But that is a call to action for you, man, if you don't mind. we will certainly give her the time she needs when she joins. So I'm going to move on. We'll get back with you here in a moment, Jennifer. So sorry about that. Back to you, Darkinia. I'd like to get in a little bit more depth understanding of, you mentioned some of the barriers that folks have to accessing basic human and legal rights. Could you talk a little bit about specific cases that have been barriers to advancing environmental justice, and how your organization seeks to mitigate those barriers? You talked a little bit about it, but here's kind of another opportunity for you.
Certainly. So a lot of the challenges is just having access to legal services, or even access to the organizations that do help specifically with advocacy for environmental justice. Being educated about it, understanding that you do have rights, and then what the next step looks like to actually advocate for those rights. So oftentimes people move into certain areas due to poverty. I mean, they don't necessarily, they move there and don't necessarily want to be there, but due to poverty are unable to escape their circumstances. And so it then becomes incumbent upon us to kind of be the champions for those people who are unable to advocate for themselves, which is what we do. Our mission in particular is to advocate for those low-income and vulnerable people who literally cannot advocate for themselves. I specifically, mentioned the Camp Lejeune situation, but I mean, it can be any scenario where you are finding yourselves in a situation unable to access resources, or, the physical, health of the scenario. Even I know this organization does focus on planning in particular, and sometimes that's part of it. Even on the cultural side, when there are changes in environments that upset the ecosystem of a particular demographic, you absolutely see that in certain gentrification situations where the people of that community no longer have access to the resources that they had as that community begins to change, whether that's the local grocery store that used to be there that is no longer there and creates the food desert, or it's the church that was there and no longer there, or whatever, resource that was there that kind of upsets the balance of that community and actually just changes the culture of it. That is a more abstract, situation in terms of how you enforce rights for that. And a lot of times there aren't, actual laws that prohibit it, but it's the consideration, hopefully, that all of us will have as we, build communities that are accessible and culturally relevant for all communities. So yeah.
That's great, Darkinia. Thank you for illuminating that. Robert, if you're still around, same question. Talk about some of the barriers that transit planners at WeGo deal with and mitigate.
Yes, thank you. I thought about this one. I thought about this question a little bit. As is common, well-connected and stable communities are able to advocate for what they want much better than traditionally overlooked and less established communities. So this means that we sometimes get calls for new services or improvements or comments about how things are not good and they should be better. We sometimes get those from areas that are not our highest need areas. When we look at the demographics of where we serve and who needs transport disadvantage, needs better transportation, then maybe our requests are not coming from those areas, they're coming from other areas. So in those instances, we have to balance between being responsive to community requests. Everybody wants the bus company to be responsive. One of the advantages of buses is that you can flex the service. You can move a bus stop much cheaper than a train station, and you can move a bus route a lot easier than a rail station or a light rail route. So we should be flexible, and we certainly should be community responsive, as I told you in our original answer as to what mission statement is about being responsive. But you know, if that request comes from an influential council member or an influential community member, or someone who's got a lot of connections in society, in the community, then, you know, it's hard for us to turn down and tell them, no, we actually want to provide service over here where everybody's largely silent because they've got a whole bunch of other problems going on in their life rather than completing a complaints form on the WeGo website. So we don't want to turn those people down, but we also do want to focus on the disadvantaged, and indeed we have legal requirements to do so, as I said earlier, with our Civil Rights Act and Justice 40 initiatives and several executive orders. So we have a tricky little balancing act there of representing what we believe is a silent majority. So that's definitely some of the barriers, and really, to be honest with you, I would say the best way we have of dealing with that is that, yes, we'll address those complaints that come in, but we will continue to try and ensure that the majority of our time, effort, money and projects go to the transportation disadvantaged using the data. You know, we've got data now. No one can say we don't have data now. We've got data on everything. So we can form some pretty solid bases for why we're doing changes. And they may be different to the phone calls and emails coming in from influential community members. They may well be. And we'll just try and juggle that. So that's sort of a key barrier that we discuss a lot when we get a comment come in. As I say, particularly from an influential community member. Then another thing that's a barrier is, and I'd be really interested, I bet Darkenya's got a lot to say on this, is often the way round dealing with a problem that would be solved with money or a problem that's expensive is just to give disadvantaged people more paperwork to do. You can always have a program where you're eligible just providing you fill in this paperwork that proves something. And we are certainly guilty of that. I recently discovered that our child discount is not available virtually. It's only available by going to our ticket window at WeGo Central in downtown Nashville when it's open with your child and a form and evidence of their age to fill in to get a child discount. You know, we put a man on the moon, but we're not able to give a child discount on our virtual ticketing system without you taking that child down to the ticket office window when it's open. So that's just a piece of paper that was introduced with the best intentions, but guess who's mainly disadvantaged by that? Yeah, that's right. That would be a single mother with a job and a child who for some reason needs to travel and doesn't have a school bus pass. So there's an example. Yeah, excessive paperwork in lieu of money, a very common problem. I think I'll stop there. Yeah, those are some barriers that I thought of the top of my head when you asked that question.
Yeah, thanks, Robert. Those are very good examples. I'm sure we can all think of some of our own line of work where it's unnecessary processes that keep people from accessing what everybody should be able to. Thank you. My kind of the area I wanted to go next was fleshing those barriers out a little bit more. Darkenya, are there some initiatives right now that you and your staff are trying to launch or trying to continue that you can talk about to kind of bring us into the present with your organization now? And can you talk about how you've dealt with what brought you to those initiatives and how you've dealt with mitigating barriers to EJ in those initiatives?
Yeah. Well, one thing I do want to just kind of bounce back to that Robert said is just kind of relevant to data, which is absolutely a positive step towards addressing many of the problems that we have, because a lot of things really do come out in the data if you take the time to actually review it and consider it. Looking at the data, who are the people that are being impacted? What is the demographic of the people who are being impacted by anything you do? And of course, you have to do the homework to find that out, secure the data to find that out. And if you are finding that specifically there is a particular demographic that is really being impacted by whatever law, whatever change, whatever thing that you're trying to implement, then drill deeper in that particular demographic. You asked about programs that we are working on or launching, and we piloted about 2 years ago, and now it's kind of getting into full swing. Our eviction right to counsel program, which is a program that was developed for purposes of providing that legal representation that I mentioned earlier, is not guaranteed by the Constitution. Providing legal representation, not just to appear in court, although we absolutely do that, but sometimes to just explain your rights, just explain what you should and shouldn't do. And sometimes it's just to say you don't have a defense. And sometimes even that is helpful, just to know that you don't have a defense in a particular situation. But even within that program that we operate in Davidson County, we tried to take the next step to look at the data. Who are the clients that continue to come through the door? Who are the ones that continue to call us? And so in looking at our data, honestly, what we began to find is that single Black women were our return clients, return customers. Those were the ones who continue to seek out our assistance for concerns around evictions. Some of them fully justifiable, condition issues where the residents that they are living in are just subpar, substandard, and they were reaching out seeking help, unwittingly doing what the natural thing is, or what you thought you were supposed to do: withhold rent if you're not getting the services you need, or not getting the repairs you need. The common instinct is, I'm going to withhold my rent until that, landlord, whoever, does what they're supposed to do. Well, the fact of the matter is that is a very bad idea, because the laws do not support that action, even if you are facing, facing condition issues in your home that aren't great. You are to still pay your rent while simultaneously putting the person on notice that that you do in fact have an issue that needs to be resolved, and to give them 14 days to get that resolved before going into a situation where you're withholding rent and or filing suit to get those repairs completed. But even in doing so, we found that single Black mothers were the demographic that we continued to find. And so by understanding that, we now know who we need to target to educate. We now know who we need to reach out to let them know what their rights are, but also to let them know what their responsibilities are, to try and head off the issue ahead of time. I give all of that as a reference as a backdrop for the point that understanding that kind of data helps you make an informed decision about the work you do. We could easily, just put information out there generally to anybody, to everybody, and we do, but it makes more sense to be targeted in our approach if we know that a certain demographic is being impacted. And that's the same thing, when you're dealing with any environmental justice issue, is to take the next step of learning from the people who are being impacted most, what their challenges are, what the effects are, and what they actually would like to happen in order to address the issue that's coming. So, and Robert, you mentioned earlier about getting, that feedback from, maybe more influential people, or from, people who just have a lot more power versus maybe those who don't. And the fact of the matter is, if you can, have that conversation with the demographic that's being most impacted, you can probably get the solutions that you need much better. And we've found that time and time again, and we've been much more intentional, even in our work, of looking at the data and talking to the people who are actually impacted to see exactly what they want, which sometimes is just not the answer that we thought it would be. And we're better for it, for sure, by addressing that data. But that's certainly one of the programs is our eviction right to counsel program, which does work on people who are trying to maintain housing within Davidson County to try and address their concerns. Obviously, affordable housing is a concern for all, just about everybody in Middle Tennessee. The lack of access to it, and certainly the lack of affordability of it as prices rise, and the demographic that we serve in particular is being pushed to the outskirts and into the suburbs. What is the impact of that ultimately on our economy? What is the impact of that on our kind of ecosystem that balances those who are low income with those who are more means, in order to meet all of the needs that we have in a community, whether that's someone who's working at McDonald's or at the gas station who has a place to live close to where they work, or the, more well-paid, I don't know, politicians or entertainers. All of them make up the ecosystem that's necessary for us to live. And it's incumbent upon all of us to help make that balance.
Thanks, Darkenia. Robert, you both have spoken about the importance of data gathering and data analysis in your work. I'm sure WeGo has to look really closely at its data for ridership, but also probably a lot of other things. Could you talk about data as kind of an informant for your projects and initiatives?
Yes, actually, I had that down as part of my answer to your last question of what can planners and listeners do on this call to better educate themselves. Yeah, I was nodding my head to everything that Darkenia just said. I do find that reading the source documents, particularly if it's been often quoted and if it's been widely disseminated for a long time across multiple platforms, I find that actually reading the source document yourself can be surprisingly refreshing and bring clarity compared to what you read on social media, or even on a large media site, or even on some academic site that brings all these sorts of things together. In fact, it particularly applies to academic studies, but reading the original source, reading the original survey, it's amazing how somebody managed to misinterpret like the intent of what the entire study was about, or even the outcomes, or interpreted the data in a very, very strange way. Yeah, I would say that, yeah, there's tons of data, but actually reading it is a good idea. So I think that supports what Darkenia just said. And then also what she just said, environmental justice work isn't always intuitive. You think you start knowing the answer and you Google around looking for data sources, but actually then when you start to dig into it, you end up heading down the wrong path if you don't actually ask the people involved. So you do have to be open to the possibility that you don't know everything. Even though my job title is transit planner, potentially I don't know everything about planning a trip for someone. There's a possibility that I don't know everything about planning a trip for someone. So it'd be a good idea for me to A, ask them, B, listen to their answer, and C, read the actual source documentation for all of the data that I'm using. In terms of examples of where we do that, some interesting ones were the Better Bus program we have, which came out of losing the 2018 transit funding referendum. We at WeGo came back from that loss and said, but we know our customers deserve more, and they certainly deserve more than nothing. So we came back with the Better Bus program, which stripped out all of the very expensive infrastructure, tunnels underneath the middle of Nashville, light rail systems radiating out from the center of Nashville, and focused on, we can just improve the service and we can put up better bus shelters at the bus stops we already have. So we did that change in response to what the customers who actually live there wanted. They're like, I wait too long and I get wet. It's dangerous for me to cross the street to get to the bus stop. They were not talking about light rail. They were not talking about tunnels under downtown and saving 30 seconds and worrying about car capacity or parking space being taken away by a light rail line. They were worrying about crossing the street and being rained on while they waited for their bus, and that it was too long to wait. So we wrote the Better Bus Plan for them, and we've implemented it. Like since 2018, we've implemented nearly all of our Better Bus Plan. Now we have 5 routes with a European style service. You can turn up 10, 12-minute frequency all day, every day. You can just turn up and you will not have to wait more than 12 minutes because we've spent that money, and the mayor of Nashville has spent that money on providing that service. And no, it didn't involve a tunnel, and no, it didn't involve light rail trains. But did it make a difference to those people's lives? Absolutely. So yeah, I would definitely support exactly what Darkenya just said about actually read the data, actually understand things, but in addition, go out and find out what the actual people involved actually say to you, and listen to that. Another example, I'll give another example. Suburbanites are not all rich. I must admit, when I arrived here in the United States, I thought all suburbanites were rich. And that is a widely held belief, both in Australia and America. But it turns out not to be true. Certainly now, certainly post-pandemic, there's a lot of poor people who are no longer living either in downtown or even in that inner ring of 1950s, the public housing area and those cheaper areas just on the wrong side of the tracks, for example. The classic statement, the wrong side of the tracks. No, they've now moved out and they now live 7, 10 miles out of the city. They're still tied to the city because they still have to go to work. They have a job that they can't do fully remote, so they are still tied to the city, but they live in what you think of as classic suburbia. But they are still transportation disadvantaged. And that goes against the commonly held belief that you've made it. When you've arrived in a 1/4 acre lot, when all of your neighbors have a 1/4 acre lot, that's it, you've arrived. Well, maybe you have, maybe you haven't. But we now got bunches of data that prove there's some people in some pretty desperate situations who appear to live on a 1/4 acre lot, along with all of their neighbors living on a 1/4 acre lot. So therefore, our reaction, well, we can no longer focus on transit service that only goes downtown. Having a central bus station with every single route going to and from that bus station because it's right next to where all the big employers are, that is no longer meeting the needs of all the transportation disadvantaged people in Nashville. We've got to have some circumferential routes. We've got to link neighborhoods together. We've got to link together neighborhoods and industry that might have always been out in the suburbs. Office buildings, low density industries, they now need to be linked to circumferentially to the neighborhoods around them for people who don't have a car. So that leads us to redesign our service. Now we need to have transit centers in the suburbs because we need to have places where people can interchange, because the network looks like a grid now. It doesn't look like a hub and spoke with a big central bus station. It looks like a grid pattern, because you might need to go from neighborhood to neighborhood, and you can't, the public transport is slow enough. We don't want to have to send you all the way into downtown in order to come out all the way back out again on a spoke arrangement. We need to have a transit center out in the suburbs that links services that run circumferentially. So we're responding to data, we're responding to actual events on the ground, and sometimes that is counterintuitive, but it does involve, actually read the source data, and actually believe what people say when they ask for stuff.
Thank you both for that. We have a question in the Q&A chat pod. Rose asks, how do you prove that funds are going towards a disadvantaged community? We've talked a little bit about that. Robert, you've mentioned some Justice 40 initiatives. Darkenya, would you like to, Robert, I know you just spoke, we can get back to you, but Darkenya, would you like to maybe talk about funds or at least projects, how you measure that specifically?
If I understand the question, you're asking, how do we know that funds are going into specific communities?
Yeah, I think this is probably for more of a funding distribution kind of from the federal government or the MPO or other planning agencies that have to have certain justice goals. Maybe from your perspective, though, are there ways that your project specifically target is the wrong word, cater to disadvantaged folks or groups or neighborhoods or communities?
Well, I guess I can speak to that generally. I mean, we only assist persons who are low income and vulnerable communities, and we assess that, internally through our intake process in terms of who calls us. We ask certain questions that qualify them for our services. So from that perspective, we're always addressing, that particular demographic. But from an education standpoint and just kind of out in the community, because we, give outreach to whomever, whenever. I mean, we want all people to know that's not necessarily relegated to any particular demographic. But at the same time, if we are seeing trends in our data that are impacting specific demographics, then we make a concerted effort to try and go to where those places are, literally asking the question, where, again, the demographic of single Black mothers, where are they? Are they in church? Are they at the daycare? Are they in court? Are they in the library? I mean, literally finding where the concentrations are, looking at it geographically and demographically, and zeroing in on certain zip codes, certain areas within those zip codes, and seeing where those populations are. Because despite, I'm sure, what are, great gains and efforts that we've had in planning, there are still, areas that are segregated. I mean, there are areas that are predominantly, primarily, one demographic or another. And, in some respects, that's not always bad. I mean, because there are communities that are formed, amongst people that come from similar backgrounds. And so, to the extent that we can identify those communities, we try and partner with agencies, whether they're government or NGOs, to, specifically target those areas. So I hope that answers the question. But they're outside of that. I mean, we don't have any other mechanism within our organization to otherwise distribute funding.
Sure. I think yes. It sounds like from what you've been saying that, obviously a lot of your work is inherently catered towards folks who really need it. Might you be able to comment on how your organization is funded overall? And since your work does it, maybe that can answer the question a little bit more about funding. So sorry to put you on the spot, but maybe enlighten us if you could.
Yeah, well, I mentioned earlier, we are primarily dependent on donations and grants. I mean, we're a nonprofit like, Catholic Charities, the Red Cross, or YWCA. I mean, we all do fundraisers and particular grants. That being said, as a legal services provider, I mentioned earlier that there is no constitutional right to an attorney in civil cases like there is in criminal cases if you cannot afford one. However, our government does make an allotment to provide some civil legal services across the country. And that funding is provided through the Legal Services Corporation, which is the entity to which the federal government allocates funding to then be distributed to legal services providers across the country. Just like most things, it's woefully inadequate. And for us, it represents less than a third of our budget. But nonetheless, it is a guaranteed source of, well, I shouldn't say guaranteed. It is not guaranteed because there are years that the proposal has been for zero funding, for our funding to be zeroed out. But over the last at least 30 years, it has been fairly level. Yeah, fairly level. It is not quite kept up with inflation, but we've not experienced the drastic cuts that we received back in the 80s and early 90s. Well, 80s to 90s. But that is our largest source of income, of funding, and it is, like I say, regulated by the federal government, and it does provide for there to be some access to a civil legal services provider across the country in every county. And so our particular organization, again, a nonprofit, covers 48 of Tennessee's 95 counties. We cover 48 through 8 offices, which means that, you know, a single office may cover, you know, 5 to 7 different counties. Besides that, we do receive funding from some state funding that is a part of that budget, as well as individual grants that we apply for. And again, donations that come from individuals and firms. Our work has always been and still remains a nonpartisan issue, which we are very thankful for. A lot of corporations and both sides of the aisle support the work that we do. And I think it comes from just a fundamental idea of fairness. Fundamentally, no, as a country, we don't believe that the playing field should be unequal. Nobody really wants to go up against someone who is unarmed. That just kind of goes against our fundamental sense of democracy, our fundamental sense of fairness, that no one should have to fight without, you know, anyone beside them. And so because of that ideal that, you know, you want a fair fight, and in a democracy, you want a fair fight, that those resources are provided for us to do this work. But again, unfortunately, it is not a guarantee. It is not 100% like you have in the, for example, the public defender's office, where no matter what crime you walk through the door with, you get an attorney. We actually have to turn away about half, 50% of the people who actually call us for assistance. Half of them, we let them know that we can't assist them. And one of our clients who we had assisted with getting an expungement for a low-level drug offense that he got when he was 19 years old, and has been on his record and prohibiting him from moving forward his entire life, referred to the opportunity to work with us as winning the lottery. And he got his lottery ticket, as he referred to it, and had a lawyer to help him navigate that, expunge his record, and has actually been very successful ever since, to the tune of now actually serving as one of our board members, to be able to help us direct the vision of this organization. But all of that comes from, you know, the donations and grants and allocations from the federal and state government.
Got it. Understood. Thank you, Darkenia. We can talk more about that too shortly. Robert, before I turn it back over to you, I'm going to try one more time to get Jennifer back in here. She's been a guest. To all of our attendees, sorry about that. I'm going to try and unmute everyone to see if she can pop up. This might be kind of a Hail Mary, but I'm going to try clicking this button right now, and I will immediately mute if it gets a little bit out of hand. All right, here goes. We're going to try it. Jennifer, if you can hear us, let me know. I don't hear anything yet. So sorry, Jennifer. We are just having the darndest time with technical issues. Anyway, sorry about that. We'll keep rolling here. These things happen. Okay. I have muted again. Robert, I'm sorry. I'm trying to navigate the moderator's role here and also ask questions. If you could pick up where we left off about some initiatives that maybe you've experienced in your time in Australia or with another agency that you just thought were outstanding, and that if you could wave a magic wand, perhaps that you could, without, of course, speaking ill of your current employer, I'm just trying to understand good practices so that our attendees can understand. I know I put you on the spot. I apologize. It's been an unusual day for me.
Thanks, Ian.
Feel free to speak freely.
Thank you so much for letting me know that, Ian. In Sydney, Australia, I didn't realize what a privilege this was, but I worked in, lived in a district council area that was won by the Green Party. So that might surprise some of the Americans. And in fact, even in Australia, there were only 2 Green Party members of Parliament in Australia, and one of them was elected. One of them was elected from our council district, but our council member was a Green Party member. And of course, they had bunches of really, really interesting policies that were not enacted anywhere else in Australia. One of them was radical transparency. And their radical transparency extended to every single meeting and every single engagement. And sometimes, you know, it made a meeting extremely cumbersome. And it made correspondence extremely cumbersome. Everything was going to be public. Everybody knew that every email and everything was going to be public. But they worked really hard to make it true. And to be honest with you, it was kind of interesting, the amount of work that was required. Everybody complained about the amount of work that was required to fulfill what they described as radical transparency. Oh, we can't speak until the video camera's turned on. Oh, I'm not allowed to tell you this because I don't have any recording of it. So we can't even have the conversation. And people used to complain about that. However, after a year or two, man, you could look stuff up and you could follow that conversation, and it was filed properly and you could publicly access it. And it didn't take 3 weeks, and you didn't fill in a form and go down into the basement. You just walked in through the door and said, I want to know about that conversation on that day with that council member, please. And someone tapped on their computer and they'd spent the money and the filing system worked. So the radical transparency thing was really interesting to me because everybody started to use it. Everybody started to use it. And referring back to my earlier comment about people who are advantaged don't realize what it's like to be disadvantaged. And people who are disadvantaged don't typically have the opportunity to interact and comment on complex subjects. They don't have hours and hours every evening to sit in front of the computer Googling. They don't have an internet connection that's definitely working. They don't know someone in the mayor's office. They only just arrived. They didn't have a reliable telephone line until last week. No, their number didn't stay the same as last year. So no, I can't reference the phone number. They started to use this. They started to use this system. They were like, wait a minute, whatever happened about that drain that was blocked? Oh, we can look that up. We can look that up and find out that it was ignored. Whatever happened to that case that was made the news? What did the council member do when they said they were going to do everything possible? What did it actually do? Oh, nothing. And here's the documentary evidence that shows where the correspondence stopped and where the council member didn't follow through, despite the recording we have of the council member saying they were going to do everything possible to help people in that community. Here's the evidence that they didn't. So I always when people say to me, you know, what practice was surprisingly, you know, beneficial to disadvantaged people that you came across, that's one I like to talk about. Sorry, I've gone on at length about that single issue, but so I'll stop there. But that was always a fun answer I like to give to your question.
Sure. No, I'm happy to have it. Thanks, Robert. At this point, I'd like to remind our attendees that feel free to put in any questions or chats. There is, if you can see in our Q&A box, Jennifer from Cumberland Region Tomorrow is saying she's sorry she can't join, but we will certainly have her on for another speaking opportunity. We can even actually take these questions and have Jennifer respond to them in writing and reply to all of the attendees for today if you registered, or even if you didn't, if you're an attendee today, we have those records and can reply to all of you with Jennifer's answers to our questions today as a plan B, sort of. And of course, we will make all of our speakers contact information available to you, and you can feel free to follow up with them. I hope I'm not creating more work for them, but I'm sure they'd be happy to take any questions that you have. Thank you again. A reminder to folks, please put your questions in the chat. If I could maybe read something from one of colleagues that we all know, Leslie Meehan, has put in a chat about the minimum rental housing standards in Tennessee have not been updated since the 1970s. Perhaps this is a topic that we can explore for a future TAPA webinar. The standards are under the purview of the Tennessee Department of Health, which is the agency that Leslie works for, but sometimes state departments need outside pressure as impetus to change policy. I'm sure we can all think of some examples where that would be the case. Thank you, Leslie, for that comment. If you have other comments or thoughts like that, we would be happy to bring them live. And this just in, everyone, our own Jennifer Chalos is finally here. Better late than never, as we say. Jennifer, can you hear us all right?
I can hear you and I can see everyone. I have been listening as much as I can, and I apologize for
no problem.
Figuring it out.
No problem. We are sorry. This is actually a reminder for something I was supposed to say at the beginning. We are in the process of kind of beefing up our TAPA resources and our reach. One of those specific items is to have some extra help on the administrative side of our programming to really standardize this process so that it's just not our board and me trying to fix all these technical issues. So from that perspective, I do apologize. I hope it will get better. But now that you're here, I would love for you to have the floor for as long as we can get you before you leave again. So Jennifer, please talk about Cumberland Region Tomorrow, your experience in the nonprofit world and your initiatives as they relate to environmental justice. I know that's a lot, but start wherever you'd like.
It's okay. And I really don't want to take away from the ability for everyone to ask questions of everyone else. So I am a Nashvilleian now. I moved here in 1998, but I've been around for longer than that. And my values, or at least what drew me to this city, to this area, was very much my experience growing up on Long Island, as well as living in Atlanta right when the Olympics had happened, I guess, and were being built up. So inequity, as well as environmental, as far as valuing quality, what makes a good quality of life has been front of mind for me as a person and someone who works in the different areas. So moving here, and immediately was drawn to organizations and having an impact on keeping this place what it's like, meaning like what makes this place great, what makes Middle Tennessee great, and this Cumberland region. And it aligns very much so with what Cumberland Region Tomorrow does. I value open space, I value green space, access to, goods and quality of life that make things great, parks, open space, different things like that. Cumberland Region Tomorrow has been around for almost 25 years. We are a nonprofit organization funded by the generosity of our community, companies, sponsors, and otherwise. We exist to educate, endure, and conjure up and foster conversation as well as collaboration to help facilitate discussions on growth in our communities, in the Cumberland region in particular, and to bring in experts from outside to help us to inform and educate others. We primarily focus on presenting programming and partnering with other like organizations or ones that aren't necessarily doing work in planning or growth to make sure that we're offering our services, but making sure that many people are involved in this conversation. In the 25 years that we've been around, we've done studies and done a lot of work in collaboration with elected officials and community leaders. In this current year, we've been focusing on hosting forums on topical issues that affect our communities, like transportation, growth, planning, agricultural, land use, health and well-being within a community, convening people and community engagement. And this year we're focused on transportation and mobility. This is a big issue for our community, and especially with the option that the city of Nashville has presented with the Choose How You Move transportation improvement plan. While we're not weighing in yes or no or telling you to vote either way when it's up for referendum on November 5th, we do want to make sure that we're providing education and resources to allow for anyone to really learn about what we're doing. I come at the work with Cumberland Region Tomorrow, not from a planning background, but from living in this community, working with nonprofits that touch on every issue: arts, humanities, education, law, legal access, all kinds of areas. So for me, my work at Cumberland Region Tomorrow and the work that we're doing to present our summit, which is on September 17th, that's focused on transportation and mobility in the region, is very much keeping an eye out for who's not hearing the stories and the messages and and being a part of those conversations that are being presented all around the Nashville community, but also around the region, that relate to transportation, mobility, and to be able to express their issues. So while I'm late to the conversation here, when I think about environmental justice and the work that we do, I don't want to miss anybody in any audiences, individuals, residents, business people, hearing about or being able to voice what their concerns might be or needs might be when we are being asked to vote as at least Nashville residents on a referendum to have a dedicated funding stream for transportation for now into the future. So I am keeping an eye out for who else needs to hear about this. What's the message that resonates with them? What are the questions that they have? What are the issues that they have? So all this to say, and I'll pause because of course I want to let the audience have questions for our esteemed speakers who are with me here. We have a summit coming up. It is a fundraiser for CRT, so there is a cost for this summit, but we also have open access and scholarships and want people to be a part of this. It is downtown. It's not in every community, our specific thing, but do want to make sure we're not missing any voices. So I would invite any one of you, my fellow speakers, or a part of this as a guest, to just make sure that Cumberland Region Tomorrow at least knows who needs to be hearing about the story and be included in these conversations that are happening. We are here to serve and make sure that voices are heard, but also that we can get the information out there. So I'm going to pause because there were lots of great questions that were asked and answered, and I'm just offering some background information at the very least. Thank you.
It's fantastic, Jennifer. Thank you very much, and we'll get to more in a minute. If I could, I want to address a question we just got in the chat, which actually was speaking to something that you were already about to talk about, Jennifer, and I think we can open it up to our other speakers too. I'm going to read the question and give a quick insight that I have for our attendees as planners and others. Brian says, we're doing a mid-decade census count. How do we get with our disadvantaged folks and others who may not have access to technology to respond or have language barriers or other issues? That's a great one, and I think we can kind of shift into that realm too, because I think that, as planners and others, if you're not specifically in the planning realm, you may be, if you don't already know. If you aren't in that specific realm, you still have to get your message across, whatever your goals are, right? And so how to effectively do that, no matter what position you're in, is really important, especially if you're trying to reach underserved folks. And so let's take this question from Brian and kind of unpack it a little bit. As I'm a planner myself, and we ask ourselves every single time, how do we best reach people when we're going to the public for comment, or if we're just trying to get feedback on surveys or anything. So I think folks listening would love to have this question unpacked by our panel here. Maybe we go to Darkenya next. Darkenya, in light of this question, how are you reaching your folks specifically? What are specific strategies? We're talking, cold calling, knock on doors, have it at the bus stop, have it on the side of buses. What does messaging look like to you and your organization?
Yeah. More often than not, it's dividing and conquering. A lot of times there's this desire or propensity to kind of emanate from a single source. Often it's Nashville. And to try and get out to the communities from Nashville, and and I'm speaking in a more regional sense, obviously, and that does work from some perspectives. For example, text messages that go to phones. One thing that we have found with most of our clients is all of them have cell phones. Most, if not all, have cell phones. whether they're always on, whether, they always have the capacity to receive, text, without cost, that varies, but more often than not, they do. And so that is one way that we have found by sending text messages, text surveys, we're able to reach our clients. But I mentioned, getting outside of Nashville or going local. We really are dependent on going into the communities and connecting with partner agencies that are in the communities, and using their local expertise about, how we access the communities we're trying to reach. A lot of times we think we might have the answers from our, particular seats, and it's just completely different when you get into that community. Oh, if we just, have them to fill out the form online, certainly they can, that gets to everybody, right? Well, no, everybody does not have access to internet. Everybody does not easily jump online. Everybody does not have the capacity, to jump online. So it is very much a thing where we are asking the experts. The experts are the people who live in those communities and know better about who they serve. So for us, that's one. But then two, being flexible in your modes of communication. Everything is not online. It can't be online, because a lot of people just aren't there. We do, and a lot of things we do, particularly when we're collecting data to kind of get an understanding of the environment. We are doing phone calls, we are doing letters, we are doing texts, we are making it available online, and we are talking to our partner agencies and asking them what they think we should do to be able to address those, demographics, to really get a good understanding of our various communities.
Yeah, I think that's well said, Darkenia. And for a lot of us practicing professionals, there isn't one silver bullet to get everybody the message that they need. We need to have like a whole toolbox, right? We need to have many different types of ways to interact with people.
And if I could
Go ahead.
mention one other thing, in addition to that, this is where the importance of diversity comes in. A lot of times, particularly in certain communities, if you don't present a certain way, you're just not going to get into that community. As you can try all day, but you're just not going to get into that community. And so that's where diversity, really does play an important role to make us all better, is that when you have those different, ethnic or racial demographics, or, religious demographics around the table, working hand in hand with you, you're able to extract more of the information that you actually need, because the question is coming from a trusted source. I know we make a conscious effort, and we make a conscious effort to hire varying demographics and people who speak different languages, because we need them to be able to interact with the communities. It's important for us to have, any Arabic speaker, Egyptian, on staff, and we do. It's important for us to have Spanish speakers, and not just people who speak Spanish, but are, culturally within that community, so that they understand the specific nuances, of certain communities. And so we do. We absolutely, use things like language line and capital linguistics in order to be able to speak different languages to, anyone who comes to us. And that's a very, very important part of our practice. But going the next step to actually try and have those people on staff, to be advisors and to interact in those communities, to get to those places that otherwise, you may not pick up on if you don't.
Those are great specific examples, Darkenia. Thanks. One thing I can add, in our line of work, we make sure that we can partner with neighborhood organizations and have neighborhood leaders that can bring us into the community when we're trying to get feedback from them, because I think you're right. Appearances of they can mean a lot, even if they're not supposed to. Robert, in WeGo's work, are there some projects that you can share where you have good examples of good engagement, and or maybe an example of where, you know what, we really missed the ball with that one. We could have done a lot better. In those instances, did you bring in neighborhood organizational leaders, or did you, for a conscious reason, choose not to in that particular sense? Maybe you can speak about a specific example where appearances were relevant.
Yes, along Nolensville Pike, which is a very busy radial route out of southeast Nashville, and has a bunch of all different sorts of cultures live along Nolensville Pike, notably huge numbers of Kurdish people. We carried out some improvements in coordination with the Nashville Department of Transport. We were interested, as I alluded to earlier, in giving a high quality waiting experience, so higher quality bus stops. They were, well, both of us were interested in being able to cross the street. Nolensville Pike is one of the most dangerous streets in Nashville, but our bus passengers go both ways. They want to go in the morning and they want to come back in the afternoon. So by definition, they got to cross the street either in the morning or in the afternoon. So we had a lot of shared interests there, but nonetheless, the project was split, crossing the street and improving the bus stops. So we partnered with businesses that lived and people that lived and operated along the route. And I'm afraid to say that it just costs money to do that. You're going to need to have people who speak multiple languages. You're going to need to have meetings at different times of the day. You're going to need to have them in venues that people are not frightened to go to, as well as the venues where people think it's official. Oh yeah, this is a big deal because it's being held in a community center. It's being held in a police precinct. It's being held in a metro facility, so I know it's official. You definitely want to do that because you want all the metro government departments to look like they're all on the same, singing from the same hymn sheet. But on the other hand, there's going to be a bunches of people who are never going to darken the doors of a building with metro government seal written on the top of it. So you're going to have people with tables and chairs standing by the side of the road at 7 p.m. If that's when the busiest bus arrives somewhere on Nolensville Pike, you're going to have guys out there with a clipboard at that time. So it just costs money to do because you've got to do those things. Salama Ministries, Plaza Mariachi is a business of local Latino restaurants. Project Return that helps veterans get back into society. All of those businesses and non-profits and organizations, we spoke to all of them, and they all told us to come at different times. We did have to go at different times, and as I say, you just have to pay your staff to be out there. As well as all of the more traditional things, the internet form, the Google form, the having a meeting in the downtown planning department. You have to do those as well because people expect those things as well. Failures, I would say, yes, I think Darkenya probably highlighted some of those. If we didn't employ people that looked and spoke like the people we wanted to talk to, the technical ability to speak the language was not enough. They just wouldn't approach you. They won't approach you if they don't think that they're going to get a fair shake. Never mind even trusting you, but even do I think this person's going to deal with me impartially? I'm not going to approach you. Why should I spend my time by the side of the street at 7 p.m. talking to this person with a clipboard? I don't really trust that they're going to take my views on board anyway. So yes, failures there. It's not just about the technical ability to speak or write the language. They've got to look. They've got to look like someone who looks like the demographic of the people they're interviewing, and that's hard. Again, now you're talking about finding a specialist agency or paying people in the community to do it. So maybe we need to be better at that, because we know from asking people demographic questions that we didn't get representative answers. We've got the demographic answers. We asked the question, we got some answers. So why doesn't our survey results demographics look like what we think the makeup of the neighborhood is? What else other than the neighbor and the languages? I agree with you. The cultural appropriateness of the person asking the question. And then of course I'm going to chuck in childcare. I love to talk about childcare. If you don't offer childcare, mothers can't come. There you go. Oh, that was easy, wasn't it? Solving it, not so much. Solving it, not so much. Because even if I take on a Kurdish woman to look after people's children, how many Kurdish mothers are going to turn up and trust that the Kurdish lady I've employed to look after their child is really going to look after their child while she answers the survey or puts dots on a map or takes part in a meeting? You know, that's a tough one. But yeah, I feel like we're nowhere near providing childcare to assist people with coming to events. Nowhere near it. And I don't know what all the solutions are to that.
If I can interject here and just, with the case in point relative to what you were saying, to take it even one step further, in terms of coming to an event, we were similarly, trying to put together something to invite a certain demographic to an event, not getting much response. Went a little deeper to understand, what we needed to do differently, what we needed to provide. Was it childcare? Was it, the other things? And in asking the questions, we found out that we didn't need to have an event at all because that's not how they function. They don't come to events at all. Typically, they take the issue back. It's discussed among, a certain group, and they make a decision of who or how it should proceed from there. So we could have had all the wine we wanted, all the charcuterie boards we wanted. They were never going to come because culturally, that's not how they handle business. And so that's just, what comes from the diversity of asking, deeper questions and really meeting people where they are and not where we just assume it should be.
Go ahead,
Yeah.
Jennifer.
I was just going to add on to what both of you have said. And, Robert, yes, it does take money and it takes some planning, though. I think if you can assess and understand who you want to reach, obviously, or who needs to be involved and where they are, where they live, what they represent. I would also add literacy level as well. I mean, language is obviously a barrier, but people's ability to actually read and understand is something we do need to take into consideration, especially depending on age or income level or whatever that might be. But a multimedia approach to garner, to reach different audiences, but also to garner trust and having some level of endorsement, as you mentioned, Darkenia, with having community members, neighbors being able to speak to it, people who are within those communities to be able to respond to, or to be able to say, it's okay, this is something I'm doing, this is something that's important. I do think, too, having some sense of urgency or timeline will help to get people to act. I receive something, and if there's not a deadline for it, I'll forget about it. I'll just move on from it, whatever that might be. So if you're doing a census and you want to collect it, and there will be a deadline, of course, with that, it seems like being able to put some sort of a marker that we all need to get this done, a sense of urgency. And I've just had some success with this organization, but others too, like attending and being a part of the community yourself as an organization. So we have 16 board members, and every one of them are involved in different businesses and different organizations or groups or churches, congregations, groups out there. And we want to arm them as much as we can with information to be able to speak and be a part of and represent CRT out in the community in one way or another. If we have something we need people to do, like sign up for or join our event that's on September 17th, in this case, your question is about a census count and participation. We want to arm people with quick information so that they can feel comfortable getting it out there. But to Darkenia's point, having those community contacts and partners to be able to have it relate and be trusted within other communities is important. So I would say planning and, obviously investing in it, but being realistic about it and setting a timeline for yourself is important.
Great points across the board. Thank you all. In our remaining 6 minutes, just want to remind folks that maybe last call for questions here. I'd like to conclude our programming webinars with kind of a final question about, how can our audience members, attendees, and practicers or non-practicers in the planning world, what should they take away from this that if they want to get more involved with you? I'd love to give a final plug to each of you for talking up your work, and we will share your information, your contact information, if people have specific questions they want to take you offline with. If we could just do in our remaining moments, what is something that you would love to just tell somebody about your work, or what's the 35 words or less, when you're in an elevator pitch type situation that you can get someone excited about your job or what they can do to further your goals in their communities. Perhaps we go back to Darkenia with that.
Sure. So again, we are the Legal Aid Society. You can always find us on our website at las.org, Legal Aid Society, just las.org, and to find more information about the work that we do, in addition to a lot of self-help materials. We do a lot of work to try and create easy to read, easy to understand, fifth grade reading level materials to kind of demystify and break down a lot of legalese. Whether that's housing work or, family law or domestic violence, consumer protection, immigration, all sorts of legal issues. You can all find those resources on our website at les.org. If you're interested in volunteering, you can also find that information on our website. We'd always love to have you to do that. We'll be celebrating our 55th anniversary on December 7th. We'll have an event that evening at Fisk University Jubilee Hall to celebrate our 55th year in existence doing this great work across Middle Tennessee. I guess in terms of a parting thought relative to the work that we're doing here, I think the biggest issue when it comes to environmental justice is just to remember that there is no single, as we say, silver bullet. There's no big bad monster, that we're trying to defeat. It more often than not, it's a series of little things that have added up to create an environment that is harmful to people. And so it makes it incumbent upon each of us individually to do what it takes to try to avoid that. It won't show up, like I said, as some one big thing. It may show up as a property tax. It may show up as a tax law. It may show up as some zoning, decision. It may show up as redlining, just, pushing certain demographics in a certain direction. It's often just one little thing. And if you are in a position of power, or if you are in a position where you can bring the issue up to help it come to the top, then that is an active effort to address the issue at hand. To just be mindful, and that's really what a lot. When you talk about, considerations for others, that's all it is. It's just being mindful. Don't let it get past you whether or not you've considered, the impact of what you're doing on the demographics that are being affected, and paying attention to whether there's a disproportionate impact on any particular group. It is no secret. It has always been the case that minorities have more often than not found themselves in a situation where they are being impacted by the negative impacts of environmental justice. And unfortunately, the way it's set up, more often than not, those same disenfranchised people are the people who are supposed to fight for their rights. They're not in a position to fight for the very thing that they need. And so it's up to us to just take that one step to make that change.
That's great. Thanks, Darkenia. Robert, go ahead. And Jennifer, you'll have the final word.
Transport affects everything. Think about transport in terms of equity, in terms of the environment, in terms of who it's impacting and who cannot benefit from anything. It doesn't have to be the way it is now. People don't have to die on our roads. You don't have to wait 45 minutes in a ditch for a bus. You don't have to be too frightened to let your child to walk around to a neighbor's house. I've lived in other places, so I can confirm that that is not necessary. You can change it. Please do so. One method of doing that would be to learn about the Choose How You Move referendum in November and get out and vote.
Thanks, Robert. Go ahead, Jennifer.
Then appropriately tailing on that, I would encourage you to get involved with Cumberland Region Tomorrow. You can visit our website at www.yourcrt, as in Tom, or tomorrow.org. But visit us and sign up. We have our event on September 17th. It's the Power of 10 Summit. Hundreds of people will be there. We've got some, WeGo's going to be there. I was going to say, we've got a lot of people there, but more people need to hear about this and come, as I said in my small segment. There are people, I come home to my household, and I've got teenagers and a lawyer as a husband, and neither one of them really understood the Choose How You Move or Tennessee Improvement Plan. And then when told about it, said, I don't ride the bus. Why do I need to know about this? So my talking points need to be, I'm better at this, but we need to be open to evolving as we learn and hear questions, but also to be able to be comfortable and open to engaging and inviting others to break down barriers, to learn more, and to challenge our own complacency and not get too settled in how we think. There's a wide world out there, and every day it's changing if you just look around in your neighborhood. So I encourage you to join, sign up, be a part of our upcoming Power of 10 Summit. But also think about how we as an organization, how Cumberland Region Tomorrow can help you to help build better conversations, to help improve the quality of life in our region, and just take care of each other.
Very well said, Jennifer, and everybody here. Thank you so much for the time. We're going to conclude. Our speaker emails are in the chat. If you're unable to access it, reach out to somebody on our team. Find us at tennessee.apa.org, and we'll connect you to our speakers here. Jennifer and Robert and Tarkenia, thank you so much for your time. This was a great conversation. We will get the recording out to attendees. We will get your contact information out to attendees, and we will get information about the events that you just spoke about out to our attendees. And to everyone joining, thank you very much. The link to claiming this webinar for CM credits, if you need it, we'll get that out to you also. Again, my name is Ian Preston with TAPA, and we will talk to you all later. Have a great weekend. Bye, everyone.